The moon mission is back, but this time it's not really about the moon. What just happened changes the strategic landscape in space and here on Earth. NASA has just launched 4 astronauts on the first crewed lunar mission in over 50 years. A historic return, a technological milestone. But right now, this signals something much bigger. Because this mission isn't just exploration, it's positioning, and the timing is not accidental. For the first time since the Apollo 17 era, humans are heading back toward the moon. But unlike the Cold War, the competition is no longer symbolic. It's strategic, economic, and increasingly urgent. At the center of this shift is China. While the US launches astronauts, China is quietly building its own path to the moon, bases, resources, long-term presence. This is no longer a race for prestige, it's a race for control. And what happens next could shape not just space, but supply chains, technology dominance, and even your economic future back on Earth. Because most people are missing the real story here. This didn't start today. What you're seeing now is the result of a slow, deliberate shift that's been building for years. After decades of silence following Apollo 17, the United States stepped back into the lunar race with a clear objective: return, not just visit. That's where NASA's modern program comes in. A phased strategy, test missions, deep space flights, which were directing lunar care to turn the real energy with a lunar jobs. If you like them to get themselves, then like the real energy works for me here. A phased strategy, test missions, deep space flights, which were directing lunar care to turn the real energy works for me here. That's where NASA modern program visit, missions, deep space flights, and now, a crewed return orbiting the moon. Each step designed to rebuild capabilities that haven't existed for half a century. But this timeline isn't happening in isolation. At the same time, China accelerated its own lunar roadmap, robotic missions, sample returns, and now, plans for a permanent research base near the moon's south pole. 2 timelines, moving in parallel. And here's where it gets serious. The overlap isn't coincidence, it's convergence. Both sides are targeting the same regions, the same resources, the same strategic positions. What looks like exploration is quickly becoming competition, and what happens next is the real story. Here's what actually happened, step by step. NASA launched 4 astronauts aboard its newest deep space system, sending them beyond low Earth orbit for the first time in decades. The mission profile is precise. A multi-day journey, a controlled orbit around the moon, high-resolution mapping of potential landing zones, especially near the lunar south pole, then a safe return to Earth. On the surface, this looks like a test flight, but it's far more calculated than that. Every maneuver is collecting data for something bigger: sustained presence, landing systems, resource access, future infrastructure, and timing matters. Because this launch comes as China ramps up its own timeline for a crewed lunar landing within this decade, backed by a long-term base strategy with international partners. 2 missions, 2 directions, same destination. But this is where the story changes. The real competition isn't about who lands first, it's about who stays and who controls what comes next. This is where the mission shifts from exploration to strategy. The moon isn't valuable because of distance, it's valuable because of position and resources. The lunar south pole, the exact region both NASA and China are targeting, contains something critical: water ice. Water in space isn't just water, it can be converted into oxygen for breathing and hydrogen for fuel. That changes everything, because it turns the moon into a refueling station for deeper space missions. Mars, satellites, defense systems all become easier, cheaper, and faster to reach. But there's another layer most people miss. Control of these manas effectively means control of future space infrastructure, launch points, supply chains, orbital logistics, and once one side establishes dominance, it becomes extremely difficult for others to catch up. This isn't just about science anymore. It's about who builds and controls the next economic zone beyond Earth. And right now, that race is accelerating. Here's what you need to understand. This mission is not about returning to the moon. It's about preventing someone else from owning it. For NASA, the strategy is clear. Move first, build alliances, and set the rules before the environment becomes contested. That's why the US is pushing international frameworks, agreements that define how lunar resources are used, who gets access, and under what conditions. Because in space, the first system that works often becomes the global standard. But China is playing a different game: slower, more centralized, infrastructure-focused. Instead of setting rules, China is building facts on the ground, or in this case, on the moon. robotic missions, base planning, long-term presence. Two strategies. One tries to shape the system, the other tries to bypass it. And this is where the tension builds. Because if both succeed, the result isn't cooperation. It's parallel systems competing for control in the same space. And once that happens, the risk isn't just rivalry. It's fragmentation, of access, of technology, and eventually, of power itself. But the other side tells a different story. From China's perspective, this isn't a race. It's a correction. A long overdue step toward balancing space power that has been dominated for decades by United States and its allies. In this view, China's lunar program is not aggressive, it's stabilizing. A way to ensure that no single nation controls access to critical space resources. And there's a strategic narrative behind that. While NASA promotes open frameworks and international cooperation, China positions its approach as more inclusive for emerging space nations, offering partnerships without political alignment requirements. But here's where the risk emerges. Different systems, different rules, different alliances. What one side calls cooperation, the other may see as control. And in a domain with no clear enforcement authority, misunderstandings scale quickly. A base becomes a signal, a resource claim becomes a dispute, a presence becomes leverage. And once both sides are operating in close proximity, with competing rules, the margin for miscalculation shrinks. Because in space, there are no buffers, only distance and decisions. This may feel distant, but the impact is very real. Because space competition doesn't stay in space, it comes back to Earth, through economics. As NASA accelerates missions and China expands its lunar program, government spending rises. Billions flowing into aerospace, defense, and advanced manufacturing. That sounds like growth, but it comes with pressure. More spending can mean higher deficits, and over time that feeds into inflation. What this means for you is simple: higher fuel costs. Because space and defense programs compete with energy investments, higher prices for goods. Because supply chains shift towards strategic industries, chips, materials, rare elements. And jobs? They move too. More opportunities in high-tech sectors, but fewer in traditional ones that lose priority. But this is where it gets serious. If competition escalates, space becomes another front in global rivalry. And markets don't like uncertainty. Volatility rises, investment slows, costs increase. So while this mission looks like a leap forward, it may also be the beginning of a more expensive world. So what happens next? Right now, this signals acceleration, not pause. NASA will move quickly from orbital missions to landing execution. The objective is clear: establish a sustained human presence before the window closes. At the same time, China will compress its own timeline, pushing toward a crewed landing and early-stage base construction near the same polar regions. Two paths, converging fast. In the short term, expect rapid milestones. Test landings, infrastructure deployment, strategic partnerships expanding on both sides. In the midterm, the risk increases. Competing zones of operation, conflicting resource claims, parallel systems that don't fully recognize each other. And that's where the real uncertainty begins. Because the next phase isn't about al-wusul to the moon, it's about staying and defining the rules of presence. If coordination fails, space becomes divided. If competition intensifies, costs rise, on Earth and beyond. And if one side gains an early advantage, it could shape the next generation of economic power. So watch this closely. Because this isn't just a mission, it's the opening move in a much larger game, one that's still unfolding.